Insperity presents the Small Business Advocate Show with Jim Blasingame, brought to you by FedEx, CareerBuilder.com, and Palo Alto Software. This is a copyrighted production of Small Business Network, Inc., all rights reserved.
You're listening to the man whose mother still thinks he should try to get a real job.
Dear folks, I got this great job in a gas station. I don't want to say how much I'm getting, but let's just say it's a lot. I'm enclosing $2.
That's a good boy.
Jim Blasingame, the Small Business Advocate.
Well, welcome back, 34 after the hour. Thank you very much for hanging out with me. Thanks for being part of my day. Very excited about having our good friend Gary Moore back on the show. Gary's an original founding member of our Brain Trust. Later this year, we'll celebrate his 15th anniversary as a member of our Brain Trust. He's the founder of the Financial Seminary. He is the author of several books, including Faithful Finances 101. He's a Wall Street guy, formerly a Wall Street guy, he's a recovering Wall Street guy, I'll put it that way. And he's a guy we turn to many times during the year to help us understand what to do with our money. Gary Moore, welcome back to the show.
Good to be here, Jim.
It's good to have you back. And he's a pretty darn good economist, too, by the way, ladies and gentlemen. Gary, let's talk about gold.
Okay.
Now, it hasn't been so long ago, really, that gold bumped along in the $300 range for, decades, basically.
Right.
And then all of a sudden it got hot, and within the last 18 months it's been as high as $1,900 an ounce.
Right.
Now it's a third of that, two-thirds of that, isn't it?
Right.
What happened?
More sellers than buyers. Seriously, that's the only way you can explain it, Jim. And people, of course, the question is why are there more sellers than buyers? And the first answer is because it went up so much. Sir John Templeton, who we both loved and admired, used to have a ball, and you'd ask him, why do things go down? And he'd toss the ball up, and, of course, it would reach a point when it just naturally fell. And it's kind of the forces of gravity.
Gravity's alive and well in the marketplace, isn't it?
Yeah, you know, what goes up comes down and all of that, Jim. And you have to, there's something in, seriously now, for the listeners, you and I joke around about this, but there's something called reversion to the mean. And if there's one ironclad rule of investing, and I say if there is, it's probably reversion to the mean. There's a guy named Jeremy Grantham that I've followed since we lost our friend Sir John Templeton, who's very famous, and that's his number one principle. If you take a look, for example, at internet stocks in 1999, they had way up, and then, of course, they crashed. And if you look at housing and condos, in 2006, they ran way up, and then, of course, they come back down. And if you look at gold, it's come way up, and it's coming back down. And that's called reversion to the mean. It just means that people's emotions, in essence, make them both, at the downside, fearfully panic too far, and on the upside, they get greedy and they fearfully buy and push things up too high, Jim, beyond what the mean is the economic value of things.
But gold has a different, has another role, though, from a house or something else. It's seen as a hedge against inflation, right?
That's sometimes said, Jim, but I don't really believe it. If you look at the inflation-adjusted price of gold, even at recent highs, it hasn't kept up with what it was 2 or 3 decades ago. Remember, when was gold $800 an ounce back in
not very long ago.
The early 80s and so on? And if you adjust that for inflation, gold hasn't really kept up with it.
Right.
The Kruger and Company used to run an ad, Jim, I think it was in the early 80s, that in something like in 1900, one Krugerrand would buy one good man's custom-made suit, and it still will. Well, that's not true today. And so I have never been a gold bug, Jim. Sir John was not, and he taught me that if you want to keep up with inflation, you have to invest your money in something that is productive and creates value, and that's the way you keep up with it.
But there has been this sense that gold is an indication of the economic condition, and what we know now is that it's just like, as you say, just like every other investment, it is capable of being converted into a bubble situation, which is basically what we've had for the last 3 or 4 years, hasn't it?
Yeah, but the funny thing about gold is that it's a bipolar investment. There are people who believe inflation and deflation are the opposites, of course. Mm-hmm. And there are there's one group of people who believe gold is a hedge against too much money floating around, and there's others who believe gold is a hedge against not enough money floating around. And basically, one party just won on that, and it's not
to me, if you're going to buy gold, you buy gold as a way of diversifying, and you buy it to hold. You don't buy it to trade. What do you think?
Well, I buy it as I think there's only one real reason to own gold, and that's as a hedge against short-term economic calamity. Right. Period. It's like a term insurance policy.
Mm-hmm. Well said, Gary. Hold on to that thought, folks. We're going to come right back after these messages and talk a little bit more about other economic issues with our good friend Gary Moore. Stay with us.
Joey's gone to the rodeo, and you know some good old boys are.
Insperity presents the Small Business Advocate Show with Jim Blasingame, brought to you by FedEx, CareerBuilder.com, and Palo Alto Software. This is a copyrighted production of Small Business Network, Inc., intended for the private use of our audience. Except as otherwise provided by copyright law, all other copying, redistribution, or publication without prior written consent is prohibited. All rights reserved.